Press
Tracy, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I tried to monkey around with this computer. Besides, kick it off my desk. I think I'm just going to have to do the. I'm just going to have to do the phone thing because it is just not responding to Zoom today. So I
Oh.
apologize for that. So.
Oh, no worries, Vicki. We're just glad that we are going to be able to hear you at all.
Okay.
And learn about what this state.
Yep.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you leading this part. Thanks, Vicki.
No problem. Do you think
And
we're ready to begin?
Erica will introduce you. She'll open it
Okay.
up and then turn it over to you.
Is she on here?
She is. We're just
I'm
waiting
here.
another minute.
I'm
Okay.
just going to give people a few more minutes to come in and then we'll get started. It's
Okay.
11 now, so maybe just another minute to have people get in.
Yep, I'm out here.
Good morning, everyone. Almost afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us for our first community conversation. This is going to be the first of several conversations that we're going to be having. Today, topic of conversation is CERA's ending. Now, what do we do? CERA has been a vital part of our community for the last couple of years. They have been preventing evictions and what was that? I can hear the echo. They have preventing evictions and shutoffs for utilities to our community, and it's going to be ending soon. And we need some sort of a solution to help our clients afterwards. And the goal of this conversation is to inform the community of what the next steps will be. We've got a couple speakers today. Vicky's going to be starting out with the spending data of the CERA program, and then Nick and Kelly will be sharing the legal perspective of the solutions of what's next. So without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. Are you ready, Vicki?
Sure. I'm sorry, everyone. I do not have Zoom connection, so I'm on the phone. So I apologize for that. So hopefully everybody can hear me.
I hear you just fine.
Okay, I just brought this topic up when Tracy was on site doing our audit and said the community is going to be in for a rude awakening when this money all comes to a screeching halt and we are no longer taking applications. So I think really today is really about the awareness of how much money is left, what the time frames are, and maybe we all brainstorm together, understand the reality of what it's going to be like when these huge amounts of CERA dollars no longer exist in our community through G-Card or Catholic Charities. And I think everyone knows the CERA program, which is the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program, started January 1 of 21. And the zip codes for the entire county were split between G-Card and Catholic Charities. So we have two providers providing the same service, but to different zip codes, so we don't duplicate. And that made it real easy, and it's worked really well. So with CERA $1, there's been some additional monies added to the pot since January 1, but all of the CERA $1 have to be used by September 30th, 22, and I don't think we'll have any problem with that. We were totally granted $23,099,931. So almost 23,100,000. We have left of our CERA 1 monies that take us through September 30th. This is as of March 31. The number is $8,275,000. And then we got CERA $2, and some of the criteria on that was a little bit different than it was for CERA 1. So MSHDA pretty much tells us what pot of money to run certain people through, and if it's done wrong, MSHDA catches it on their end, and we have to switch them over to the other pot of money. For the general population, they don't necessarily know on the front end, we're just paying their rent, their utilities, and they really don't know as far as the different pots of money. But there is different criteria, and our staff knows which pot of money they're supposed to be using. So the additional CERA $2 was an additional $8 million on top of the already $23 million, and that started January 1 of this year, 2022. And of that $8 million, we have $3,833 left as of there again, March 31st. So we basically have, for the month of April 1st onward, we have about $12,100,000 left of CERA funds to spend. And just to give you some perspective, we've had over 6,000 cases in the portal. 3,287 of them have been approved. There were 443 that were rejected, and 316 of those were duplicates. So you can add that up quickly and still realize we still have a lot of applications in the hopper that we're still processing. The other thing that I could add is that right now we're averaging probably about 10 applications per day, new ones coming in. And at this point, the money, I had said before that I thought the money would last through December. It will not last that long, because if we're spending an average of probably $2.5 million a month, and you got 12 million left, it's going to get us to 4.5, 5 months, including April. So we're probably talking somewhere around August. Now, the portal will be closing. Right now, the official timeline they gave us from CERA is, from MISTA, is June 15th. But I'm suspecting, and so are they, that will probably change and go to the end of June. So probably June 30th is when the portal will close. We will not be taking any new paper applications at that point. We won't, it'll just come to a sort of an end at that point. We'll be processing from June, let's say it ends June 30th, we'll be processing applications then right till the money runs out. I have to say that MISTA is doing projections right now to see what everybody's spending patterns are, to see if there's other places in the state of Michigan that they can move money around. So if someone's spending at a much faster pace than other places, is that maybe some additional monies could come in. I don't know, everybody's asking for more money right now, so I don't have high hopes that that's going to happen, but we're just going steady at continuing to spend the money and process the applications. So I know that was a quick overview, but I think the thing I really wanted to do is point out that it is coming to an end, make sure everybody's aware what the dates are, the kind of money we have left. From that point, I think then we have to just go back to what everybody has in other dollars, if it would be our MISTA ESG dollars, if it would be other organizations, ESG or HUD money, or if it would be the county, the city pot of money, whoever, that's been divided in the community. But we all know that no matter if we pooled all that together, we are not talking millions of dollars. We're in the, for us with HARA and with rapid rehousing and prevention, you're talking we probably about to have 150,000, and 150,000 compared to the millions that we've been helping with, that's a huge difference. And many of that criteria for the ESG dollars and so on is, maybe paying up to 90 days of rent. It's not like the CERA program where the max was 18 months on utilities and rental assistance. That will not be the case when we go back to using just ESG dollars and FEMA dollars and so on. Many of those have different poverty levels. They have different criteria going to DHS and getting your SEV first, and then coming over and maybe we help with 30 days. So it's going to be pooling of different resources in order to help people continue on. So I think we should be very grateful for all the millions we've had in this community, all the families we've helped for over, since the CERA program started. The good news that I did hear this week was that GCAR did get some money, and I don't even know, it's called LIHWAP. It's Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. So I think we've all heard that water shutoffs are gonna happen, and so there's gonna be a huge cry on these, for help on these enormous water bills that people have. I think I heard projection of 3,000 households will have their water shut off. Um, oh, my computer just started working. Nope, I don't think it is working. It wants to do. Anyway, I say that water program with G card has 1.7 million, so that's going to definitely be able to help a lot of people with their water bills. So I think that's the information I have, unless anybody has questions or anything else.
Do you know when that money or when that program is going to start?
The one through G card, I had the feeling that it's already started, that they've already received their
Okay.
money. But I think we need to hear more from G card. I
Yeah.
happen to be on a different call with Health Coalition and that group. So,
Okay.
and that was concerned about the water shutoffs that are coming. So I'm just trying to put the information out there so everybody's aware of it. If you're working with anyone, know anybody that needs to get their application in before this end date, that's probably the message we need to get out to the entire community.
No, that's going to be a great resource that will definitely be utilized in the community. I do appreciate that knowledge, Vicki. I wrote it down so that I don't forget. Thank you so much, Vicki. I do appreciate your input. I'd like to turn it over now to Kelly and Nick to give their input.
I'll go first if Kelly is okay with that, because she can talk a little bit more about post-CERA matters. Well, what we've done during this time period is worked with Catholic Charities and G-Card to process applications for CERA for individuals who have gone through the eviction process already. We've noticed that through these last 2 years of doing EDP and CERA, CERA 1 and CERA 2, that a majority of landlords are filing non-payment of rent cases at this time. Our office in particular saw about a 32% increase in the amount of people that we helped from 2021 to 2022, or from 2022 to 2021. We closed about 2,434 cases, and a majority of those cases, and a great bulk of them, were non-payment of rent matters. In the past, prior to the pandemic, the majority of individuals that we assisted were actually for termination of tenancy cases where we needed to get them more time, or we needed to contest their eviction because they had a defense. When it came to non-payment of rent situations, we would help if there's a defense or if there's alternative means to help them get that rent caught up. But with CERA, landlords weren't filing termination of tenancy cases because they understood that there was funding available and people could be paid. So the primary bulk of the increase in individuals that we assisted was thankfully due to this program that we had in Genesee County. And we had staff members located in all 10 of the courts we have in Genesee County. And we noticed that obviously we didn't help everybody because there's about 6,000 applications through CERA that Catholic Charities noticed in the portal. But each court session since the pandemic started, all of a sudden there was more and more cases being filed. More and more of them were non-payment of rent situations, and more individuals started knowing and learning about the CERA program and how they could get assistance. And most of them were told by their landlord, yeah, you owe me like $3,000 in rent, go apply for CERA. And then they'd file the eviction case as well, knowing that they would have that money being paid by a third-party agency to catch individuals up on their rent. So since that time, I would say on average, there was about 60 eviction cases in any court at any time. that number is either greater depending on the location or less. In downtown Flint, we have 4 judges, and they see about 60 to 80 cases each. Some of the outlining counties such as Flushing, they sometimes have 40, but sometimes also have 60 as well. So a lot of individuals that we didn't help also went through the CERA program because there weren't very many termination of tenancy cases. It was all non-payment, and most people were starting to learn from word of mouth that this program existed, and landlords were pushing individuals to apply, even though they were filing the eviction case because they knew that they would get paid quicker. The fundamental problem that we're going to see when funding ends is a shift in the narrative. So landlords are no longer going to be guaranteed that they'll get money from this program. And with us not having a system in place prior to the pandemic, they understand that the funding that is available is capped. It's not as significant as CERA is currently. So we're going to see a shift from non-payment of rent cases to likely termination of tenancy cases. And with 2 years having gone by since the pandemic started and since CERA or EDP have been taking place, a lot of people's leases have ended. And with their leases ending, they're now month-to-month tenants. And so typically, and under the eyes of the law, a month-to-month tenant does not really have a lot of defenses against the eviction. And so if individual landlords are like, okay, well, I'm fed up with it, I got my rent paid, I don't want to deal with this person anymore, they're not going to be able to pay their rent moving forward, and there's no program in place, so I'm just going to terminate their tenancy and get them out of this household. So one of the fears that we have is an influx of termination of tenancy cases that are going to leave a lot of people homeless because there's no money available to continue the program to help pay their rent, but they don't have the opportunity or means to seek or obtain employment due to COVID, and they're unable to pay their rent. So landlords are fed up and they're like, we just want to terminate your tenancy. We'll move somebody else in who has the means to pay the rent moving forward. And another problem obviously will be with the money ending, with the program ending, and as Vicky said, about 150,000 available through the various programs in our county. If we're presented with people with non-payment of rent cases, we're very limited in what we could do from a legal perspective if they owe it and know it. And judges are not going to be as lenient. So during this whole process, all the eviction cases that we helped resolve ended in a conditional dismissal. And that means that this doesn't impact individuals moving forward as the eviction itself is considered dismissed because payment's going to be received. Prior to the pandemic, what we tried to do as an organization is get landlord attorneys to agree to conditional dismissals, but a lot of them want judgments. And that's because with a judgment, they can act on obtaining a writ or an order of eviction quicker. They don't have to file an affidavit to prove why this payment hasn't been made. And that's something that the pandemic and the CERA program helped us overcome, because it was in the administrative order that landlords had to agree to a conditional dismissal if they're going to receive CERA funding. And in addition to that, typically for a non-payment of rent case prior to the pandemic, the landlord would issue a 7-day notice and then take the individual to court for non-payment of rent. But with the pandemic and with the CERA program in place, if an individual simply stated, I'm going through the CERA program, all of a sudden there was a delay in the eviction process for up to 45 days or beyond for money to be received. With the CERA program ending, we're going to see judges go back to the traditional system, which is if you received a 7-day notice, you owe it and you know it, all of a sudden you have 10 days to pay under a judgment the total amount of rent owed. And so that's problematic as well, because one, a judgment impacts people's credit and it impacts their ability to get and obtain housing in the future, because prospective landlords will look at that and say, you're a problematic tenant. I don't think I want you living here. In addition, it's problematic because it gives people 10 days to obtain funding, but now we've lost all the funding and we only have 150,000. So who do you help when the eviction cases are not going down? You're still seeing about 50 to 60 per court case session, and majority of those will still be non-payment of rent cases that are going a lot faster than they did during the CERA process. And then another problem will be a shift in the narrative from non-payment to simply saying, I don't want to deal with these people anymore, I want them out. And so CERA has helped tremendously, not only with respect to funding being available to help people face a potential homelessness situation because their rent was paid, it also helped in changing the narrative to a more tenant oriented system instead of a landlord oriented system predominantly. It changed the narrative and gave tenants a little bit more rights than they typically had under the standard landlord-tenant relationship and dynamic prior to the pandemic. We saw that shift because landlords were no longer getting evictions and kicking people out of their homes within a potentially a 17-day turnaround. Now we had landlords waiting potentially 2-3 months before they got paid through the CERA program. And then in addition to that, we kept judgments off of tenants' records by having the cases themselves dismissed instead of the judgment impacting their ability in the future to obtain prospective housing. And it also threw a wrench in landlords' plans by providing an opportunity and outlet for individuals not to be facing a termination of tenancy case, but giving people the opportunity to get assistance to continue their tenancy and to continue residing at the place that they're renting from. And so these are the fundamental problems that I see once CERA has ended in June and once the portal closes. And these are things that we as a community have to address, because if we don't, all of a sudden we're going to see a lot of people getting evicted for termination of tenancy cases. And we're going to see a lot of people evicted for non-payment of rent cases where there's nothing we can do to help them. And that could potentially lead to a mass eviction crisis. And so I will turn it over to Kelly to explain a little bit about what we can do to address these issues moving forward as a community.
Thank you, Nick.
Welcome.
I would like to thank and applaud Catholic Charities, G-Card, and Legal Services for all of their hard work through this pandemic, for keeping people housed, getting the landlords paid so they could keep their homes, their rentals. And I know it was a lot of work, a lot of long hours, but we did really well as a community. The money that was spent to help folks is just tremendous, and it was a great help. So thank you, all of you, all the community partners, for your hard work in that. So yeah, what do we do now that the ceremony is gone? As some of you may know, before the pandemic started, the Continuous Quality Improvement Committee that was led by Jim Perlacki had talked about setting up an eviction diversion program. And we worked through it. We had the court on board, the landlords were on board, and the eviction diversion program was a way to keep people housed, get their rent paid, and again, ending the case with a conditional dismissal rather than a judgment, a credit damaging judgment. And so the landlords were on board. We're getting ready to launch it, and the pandemic hit. So the landlords were excited about it. They thought it was a great program, and I'll go through basically what it entails. But the pandemic hit and the CERA funding came out. And as you may remember, the program, the state program, only allowed 90% of the rent to be paid. And here we had been talking about eviction diversion and that we wanted to pay the entire rental arrearage. And landlords were really mad that they had to take a haircut. That's what the state called it. So first of all, we need to get the landlords back on board with eviction diversion. And so we are going to be meeting a couple different meetings with the Genesee County Landlord Association to let them know that we're reviving the program and hope that they will embrace it as they did with CERA. Well, some of them, most of them, I should say. That was the way they were getting paid. So we're going to start there, and then the court will be on board, and then we can get going. So what's eviction diversion? Well, eviction diversion programs have opened up throughout the country. In Michigan, we've had a few of them. I helped get the one started in Oakland and Macomb counties. Greg Abler from my office helped get the one going in Detroit. There's a program in Lansing. There's a program in Kalamazoo. But we wanted one here in Flint. And basically what it is, the landlord, it's driven by the landlord. So if the landlord wants to keep the tenant, they've been a good tenant, they paid their rent, they can, they opt into the program. So it's really the landlord that drives it. And so when the landlord goes to file a summons and complaint, they can decide at that point if they want to keep the tenant. If they don't, unfortunately, like Nick said, they'll file a termination of tenancy if they can to try and just get them out. But if they want to keep the tenant, they understand they had some temporary hardship, that when they file the summons and complaint, they'll decide whether they want to participate. If they do, then the tenant will get served with the summons and complaint and the information about eviction diversion. The tenant will then contact the HARA. They'll be pre-screened, and there will be an appointment set up for the tenant. So back in the day, before the pandemic, when a tenant needed help with rental assistance, they would first go to DHHS, right, and apply for the SER, the state emergency relief. Then they would go to our community partners to see if they could also pitch in, because sometimes the funds from DHHS didn't cover the entire rental arrearage. So then they would have to go over to Salvation Army, and then G-Card, and then whatever, agency to agency, to see if they could get help with this rental arrearage. This program brings all of our community partners with funding into the room, and they determine how much they can pay. Some of our partners have funding for people with HIV and AIDS. So that would need to be a screening question. Some of our agencies have funding for veterans. So that would be another screening question. But regardless, all the community partners are in the same room and making a commitment to pay a portion of the rental arrearage if DHHS can't pay the entire rental arrearage. So we do kind of have another pot of money there. We have the Department of Health and Human Services money. And I do know from my experience in running these programs in other counties that if a program spends all their money, oftentimes they're able to get money from counties that haven't spent it. So it gives us a little bit more money than the $150,000 that Vicki estimated our community partners have here in Genesee. But the tenants screened, the community partners decide how much they can each pay. Every so often, there's a small balance that the tenant needs to pay. And then the money gets paid and the case is dismissed, again, without a credit damaging judgment against the tenant. So we're hoping to revert to the eviction diversion program. Hopefully it will be successful, even though we won't have the amount of money. Hopefully the people that had huge rental arrearages were able to catch up with the CERA monies that our county had. but that's our plan. So whenever that money runs out, we want to have this plan in place, and we are working diligently to get that going. I also wanted to talk about a couple of other fun things that we've been working on with legal services and others. One is there's been a legislation introduced in Lansing for source of income discrimination. And we've been working with the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, as many of you have as well. I've seen you in the meetings, to try and get that legislation passed. And that will, it will prohibit landlords from discriminating against people that come to them with a housing choice voucher, or that come to them because their only income is Social Security. So it would prevent that from happening. And as the advocacy group for the continuum of care, run by Jill Nylander from Legal Services, we're also looking at a source of income discrimination ordinance in the city of Flint. And that ordinance that we're proposing will do other things besides prohibiting discrimination based on source of income. It will hopefully deal with these rental application fees that are excessive, and landlords shouldn't be charging. We know that a lot of our community partners can help with rental application fees, but they run out of money because the landlords are actually making money off of these fees. I think one landlord gets $5,000 a year just in rental application fees, just so they can deny people, tenancy. There's also some new, a new thing on the market for some type of insurance for the landlord, not for the tenant, where the landlord, it's kind of like forced place insurance that your that mortgage companies can put on a home if you don't maintain homeowners insurance. But it's this program where instead of tenant paying a security deposit, they make payments towards this insurance for the landlord. So if the tenant leaves owing rent or causing damages, the landlord gets paid, and then they turn around and they get the money back from the tenant. But so this ordinance, we're hoping to really expand it, a little different than the one that we're trying to get passed in the state. And then recently, Senator Brinks introduced legislation that would seal eviction records, because we know that's another barrier to being housed. And there's certain requirements for the sealing, but I think that's going to be very helpful too. We know that landlords, when they go to rent to somebody, they look at the case search on the different court websites to see if the name comes up, and then they refuse to rent to people because they may have had an eviction case filed against them. Doesn't matter that they never got evicted, just that they had a case filed. So there are some protections coming out. So I'm trying to not be so pessimistic, but be optimistic that we're going to work through these things and try and make things better for everybody. Nick, did you want to add to that?
No, I think what you identified is very good. The protections that are coming out for tenants post or even pre-eviction process for source of income, application fees, and potential rental history expungement. Those are great benefits for individuals that are looking to rent in the future. But I think one of the fundamental problems that we need to look at as a community right now is our potential eviction diversion program. But beyond that as well, a system needs to be put in place where people who are being terminated, where there's really no defenses against it, we need to have a system put in place where these individuals are not homeless. So I had a client recently that faced a termination of tenancy. They didn't have a defense against the eviction because they were construed as a holdover tenant, which means they had a month-to-month tenancy and with proper notice, there's really nothing we could do to contest the eviction itself. And the only thing we could do is buy more time. The individual received 30 days, but in that time frame, since nobody at this time is being evicted or leaving their homes due to non-payment of rent situations predominantly being filed, and CERA assisting those individuals with paying their rent, they're not leaving those places that they reside at. So our client had a difficult time finding alternative housing, and we're going to see that more often as the narrative shifts from non-payment to termination of tenancy cases in eviction proceedings. In this instance, the individual did get help from Metro and Misty for at least temporary lodging in a hotel until they could find alternative housing. But we're going to see that come up more often now as we move past CERA and into the new wave of eviction filings for termination of tenancy cases. I think landlords are going to be pretty, I don't think landlords are going to be as on board with the EDP program as they were prior to CERA and prior to the state-run EDP program, because now they've gone through 2 years of what they probably construe as a terrible situation for them without putting themselves in the shoes of the tenant, because the whole narrative shifted from landlords having all the power to tenants having all the power. And so we're going to see landlords want to regain that power again, and they're going to say, well, we don't want to participate in this EDP stuff anymore. You know, like, we've done this for the last 2 years and it's been terrible for us because we've had to wait so long to get paid. And at the end of the day, they're still not able to pay their rent. So we want them out and we're not going to participate. And with that said, if we're going to see a mass amount of termination of tenancy cases brought forward, we need to, as a community, devise a plan to help these individuals transition from their current residence to a potential future residence. And the things that we're working on for source of income, application fees, and rental history expungements will definitely help in the future. But the current problem that a lot of people that are housed at the moment are going to face is a mass exodus from their rental places, pretty much. And so as a community, again, I know I'm restating the same thing over and over again, but it's imperative that we come up with some sort of a plan and devise a system that's beneficial and that transitions these individuals from housing and into new housing and does not render them homeless, because that's what we're here for. So.
That's true. And we should remind those landlords that if they would have accepted people with vouchers, they would have been paid through the pandemic. Yep. Right. So, but we know there's a huge lack of affordable housing, not just in our community, but in our state and the entire country. And it's just getting worse. I mean, the rental rates have risen so drastically. And I suspect that these landlords will be evicting people. And it's just going to be a big cycle, people moving from one rental to the next. It's going to be the same folks that need to be housed. So yes, I think we need to look at a plan for that. Does anyone have any questions for Vicki, Nick, or I?
Kelly, this is Vicki. I just wanted to clarify, when you and Nick were using the 150,000 number, that was only for Catholic Charities, MISHTA, ESG. So there's a lot of organizations that have money that would go into this pool.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Kelly, this is Tamika from DHS, and I'm glad that you kind of spoke to just the rental rates increasing, because some of the things that we find at DHS is if a client does apply for assistance, there's the affordability piece. And a lot of these, you know, I'm sad because these people are being priced out of housing, which leads me to believe that there will be some situations where you will have landlords renting out houses that aren't safe for women and families and children to be living in. And that's my fear. You know, the rent keeps going up. The affordability piece is an issue. And I just feel like a lot of our families are going to be preyed upon because they're vulnerable.
Those fears are justified, unfortunately. And that is a factor in rental assistance, is the affordability. So that might be another barrier.
Yep. I'm happy with what you're doing though, but that was the first thing I thought about when you spoke of just the protections. You know, my mind went to, you know, well, when they come apply with us, the issue is affordability. And if they can't afford the house, we're not going to be able to assist them with getting in it because they can't sustain.
Thank you so much, Tamika. Yeah, that's a very good point. Misty, did you have a question?
I just actually have a comment because I was in a previous conversation recently with legal services and some of our other community partners. So in the past, the HARA also and I think it would help with this process moving forward, whatever that might look like. The HARA had a designated caseworker from MDHHS that operated out of the HARA 2 days a week to assist with that. Not the whole 8 hours of the day, but I think one day it might have been 6 hours, one day it might have been like 4 or 5 hours. But so many hours a week to be able to assist with people that are going through like this type of situation. And then something that Barb and I, the CERA supervisor, has also learned as we attend the landlord association meetings and questions that we've listened to the landlords conversate and go back and forth about is not all of the landlords are registering their homes and paying the fees to have them listed as rental properties. So when somebody said, well, what did you raise your rent to? I believe one of the landlords was like, well, there's not. I can raise it to whatever I want to. And so again, going back to what Tamika said about it not being affordable or rent reasonableness, which we have to follow too, even for us, that's going to create a big problem if we don't have the city of Flint and our partners making sure that landlords are registering the homes as rental homes and then doing inspections as well. And that maybe be something that we can try to focus on or advocate for at the city level. Because you were a fly on the wall in that landlord association meeting. Some of the comments and how they had talked about, well, I just do what I want and I do this. And somebody is like, oh, did you pay your landlord fees? And they're like, no.
And so to piggyback off of that a little bit, we've made arguments to each judge about individuals who don't have a rental license, and some judges interpret the ordinance differently, or at least they have in the past, and some judges do enforce it. So that's where we kind of have a problem with the whole rental license ordinance, and there was a point in time there where inspections weren't being done by the city, and landlords were like, oh, whatever, I guess if I don't need to register, I'm not going to pay the fees. And we kind of have to speak to the judges about that and get them on board with a unified system, because some judges will enforce and say, you don't have a rental license, you can't file this eviction case, and you can't charge rent or collect rent. Some judges will say, okay, well, let me adjourn this hearing and you go apply for the rental license and we can proceed in a week, you know? And the ordinance does read that you can't file an eviction case if you don't have a registered rental unit that you can legally rent to somebody else. And you should not be able to collect rent if you don't have a rental license in the city of Flint. So that might be something we could talk to the judges about, Kelly, when we meet with them about any ongoing eviction diversion program moving forward, because I agree with you, Misty. I think one of the ways we can repair the housing system in general is enforcing landlords to apply for the rental license, which then the city can conduct yearly or however they want inspections. I think it's every 3 years they have to reapply for the license. And then during that inspection, you can identify whether or not the property has significant repairs that need to be done. So it kind of addresses multiple things in one, because a lot of our clients complain about repairs. And one of the issues that Tamika presented was individuals being thrown into these properties that are not fit for their intended purpose, which is the habitability component, because the rental rates have gone up so high that individuals have to rent at the worst of the worst to be able to afford it. And rental licenses, I think, are the starting point to fix those issues moving forward. So something we'll put on our radar to talk to the judges about when we meet with them about the eviction diversion program. Thanks.
Good idea. And Misty, the eviction diversion program did contemplate that for the tenant meeting, all of the community partners would be in person. And again, that was before the pandemic. Those that had assistance that could help the particular tenants that were going to come that day for the tenant meeting, they would all be, done on the same day. Some community partners wouldn't be there. For instance, if none of the tenants that applied for assistance were a veteran, then the funder that could only fund veterans wouldn't need to come to that meeting. And there was talk about having a DHHS representative at Catholic Charity at the HARA. So I think that's something we can discuss again at our next meeting. I believe hopefully Jeff will be able to come to that meeting. So thank you.
In the comments, Tina had commented that HAPA requires an HQS before payment of rent or utilities. We also, for our ESG funds, have to do the same thing. So we have certain requirements as well that we have to meet by the grants that we're under.
All right, thank you everyone for that. Does anybody have any other questions? Does anybody have any other feedback, ideas, anything?
Kelly, this is Tracy, and thanks to the three of you for presenting this information. If someone in the community wants to contribute and be a part of the solution, Kelly, would they be a part of the meetings, that the EDP meetings? Can you let us know for those community members that would like to join this committee? Would you tell us how to do that?
Sure. The eviction diversion meetings are going to be let's see. If anyone's on the call that has that information, I'm looking at my calendar right now.
And Kelly, you can, if you send it to us, we'll forward it out.
I will. The source of income meetings for local are the third Thursday of each month at 11. Although we're going to probably change the time. So I will update you on that, Tracy. The source of income statewide meetings are Thursdays at 10 every other week. And I'll send you that information. There will be one this week on the 28th, and then every other week after that. We're trying to get some movement on the statewide. And then yeah, I'll have to let you know about the eviction diversion. I don't see it on my calendar right off the bat.
No problem.
Anything else from anybody?
I wanted to ask Tracy a question. So, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Tracy, but I know that potential eviction crisis might happen in the future, but we might have individuals now who are going through a termination of tenancy and require alternative housing, and they're having trouble finding it. I've been MIA from the COC meetings for some time, so I might have, this information might be available. I just don't know it. And if you have it, I can share it with the rest of our staff. Is the hotline still the phone number to contact to get these people in the HARA system and through the homelessness process to get housed?
That is correct.
All right, that number hasn't changed, right? It's still the same one as always.
Yes, 5-810-544 HELP.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all I got.
You're welcome.
I just have a quick question. How big of an impact would it have if the rental caps were raised by Ms. John Section 8, so that we would, bring up what they're willing to pay into a much higher level? You don't want to feed the beast so that the people keep jacking up the rents. But I'm just curious, has anybody really kind of thought about that, had past experience with seeing that cap raised in the past and the impact that it might have?
That's a good question, and I wonder if Greg wants to answer that. I don't think they've been raised in a while. Greg, do you have any further information on that?
Misty might have some information.
Okay.
Also,
It had raised by a little bit, but not much. So yeah, that would be a Michelle Edwards question I'd have to follow up on. It has changed, but it's not by much.
it still goes off of how many people are in your home too, right?
Mhm, it does. It goes by heartbeats.
Thank you, Misty.
And then girl, obviously gender as well, because they do consider the living room as a sleeping area. So if you have a mom and 3 kids, or something like that, 2 kids, depending on the gender and the ages of them, that's a factor.
Anything else? Any other questions or suggestions?
Nope. I just pray that we get what we need so people don't become homeless, because we've been through too much already and we don't need to go backwards. We need to keep moving forward. Thank you, Kelly, for all that you do. Thank you, Lucas, for all that you've done. Erica, thank you for being the host. But let us know what we need to do, because a lot of us are willing to put in the work.
Thank you, Sharice, for that. I agree with you. Tomorrow, we're going to have another community discussion. It's going to be about VI SPDAT's training and VI SPDAT turnaround. The speakers we're going to have is Travis, Misty, and Charmaine. It's going to be at noon tomorrow for anyone that would like to join. Thank you very much, Vicki. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone that had input. I agree, this is a very important discussion to be had. I think this was a good discussion, a lot of good information. So I do appreciate that. If there is nothing else, I wish everyone a happy Tuesday, and we will see you at a future meeting.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good one.